Welcome to another episode of the Profitable Home Services Podcast. Once again, I'm so glad that you chose to join us today. I know you're busy and your time is valuable, so we do our best to bring you actionable content each and every episode. Today, I want to welcome back Dr. Stephen Kirch. He's been on this podcast a couple times already, but when I find somebody that brings great value and great information, I can't help but ask them back. So, Stephen, thank you so much for joining us again.
Happy to be here, Diane.
I'm looking forward to what your profit mind has to share with us today. How's that?
Yeah, it's all about what's up here and
It is.
translating that into your pocket.
It is. Last time after we finished up our episode, we got to talking offline about how easy it is to get caught in the land of overwhelm. And sometimes you don't even know how you got there, but your little tools of distractions and procrastination sometimes help you get there. Let's break that apart a little bit today.
Sure. Well, let's start with overwhelm
Okay?
because again, it's a mindset problem,
It is.
and
Yeah.
and it's all about trying to, well, first of all, making sure that you're just worried about making progress. It's not about perfection. It's not about getting everything done because it's not possible to get everything done. It's
No.
important that you make progress on those things that are most important.
I think you and I were talking right before we went live. My desk feels like it has exploded in the last couple days here. Over
Yeah.
the weekend, I got it all tamed down and was feeling pretty good. And now I'm teetering on the edge of the land of overwhelm. But I have to remind myself that just because there's a lot on my desk doesn't mean it has to all be completed today. And I think that's a big part of it. Our minds start looking at that pile and going, I just want to stop everything else and go take care of what's sitting on my desk or the phone messages that need to be returned or the email that's unanswered. And we get lost then in what we should be focused on. And it may not necessarily be the pile of whatever's sitting on your desk,
Yeah.
but it's
I think
so easy to go to overwhelm.
it is. And I'm going to start with, how do you prioritize things? One of the challenges, and I'm sure that this is a challenge for you in terms of what's on your desk, is all of the stuff on your desk of equal importance?
It's not. And
It's
my head
not.
knows it, but my hands want to go take care of it.
That's right. And
Yeah,
so you have to, one of the problems with having all that stuff on your desk is it feels urgent,
it
right? You
does.
said, I want to get rid of it. I want to take care of it, right? And we get confused between what's urgent and what's important.
Mhm.
This is one of the principles that Dr. Covey included in his 7 habits. It actually came from President Eisenhower. It's called the Eisenhower Matrix, where you have importance separated from urgency. And sometimes, well, of course, there's the stuff that's both urgent and
And
important.
important, right?
You have to take care of that. That's emergencies or crises, right? Somebody said the difference between a crisis and emergency is your preparation. But
Okay,
um,
I like that.
yeah,
Mhm.
but what's important, what is urgent and not important sometimes overwhelms us, right? We sometimes get carried away with that stuff that is, just because it's urgent doesn't mean it's important.
Right.
So we need to separate those two things and focus on, first, of course, you have to do the stuff that's urgent and important, but then focus on the things that are important but not urgent.
And sometimes those things kind of work their way down in our list, don't they?
They do, because
Unfortunately, but they're the ones that propel the business forward. They're the
that's
ones
absolutely
that
right.
help you meet your goals and stuff. And it's so hard to keep them in their proper piece of that matrix.
That's right. And the other piece of it is that stuff that's important but not urgent, if you put it off long enough, it then winds up being a crisis, right?
Right.
And
Mm.
and I don't know about you, but I would feel much better if I have the time to address those important things before they become
Right.
urgent.
And a lot of times they take some thinking time. Where some of the other stuff that sits on your desk, I just need a minute here or 5 minutes there or whatever, and you can move them. So you feel like you've accomplished something, but in reality, if you would have blocked off some time on your calendar and taken care of that important but not urgent item, you would set yourself up for a better week, a better month, a better year, whatever that time period is. But boy, is that hard to
Absolutely.
keep it there. You have good intentions and we do really well for a while, and then we fall off and we start all over again.
Yeah. So the other thing that I want to talk a little bit about in terms of overwhelm, and this overwhelm works for email. I know we often get
Oh, we
overwhelmed
do.
by our email inbox, right? But it also works for your to-do list or your next actions list, as I like to say. I'm a big devotee of David Allen, who said you shouldn't have a to-do list. You should have a next actions list.
Oh, I
And
like that.
here's the difference. Most of the time, and I would urge the listeners to pull out a piece of paper and write down 5 things that are on your to-do list. Pause the recording, do that. Now, come back, take a look at those 5 things. Are those 5 things tasks or projects?
Ooh, big difference there.
There's a big difference. And let me define what a project is. A project is anything more than one task in a sequence. So if you have 2 or 3 or 4 tasks in a sequence, that becomes a project,
Okay.
right? The definition of a project is a series of tasks, all right?
Okay.
So you should never have projects on your next actions list because you can't actually do a project. You
Right. You
can
can only do a
only
step.
do tasks.
Right.
So,
Okay.
so you have this list now of the 5 things. Mark with a T or a P. Is it a task or a project? If it's a task, just move it over and write it on the right-hand side of the piece of paper. Okay. And I may have this backwards because I can't tell which way you're looking at it. But the point here is, so take the things that are tasks and move them to the other side. The things that are projects, ask yourself, what's the very next physical action that I can take? What's the very next physical action I can take to move that project forward? Write that on your on
Um,
the right-hand column.
I like that a lot.
Now, after you've done that with the 5 things, and I'd be willing to bet that several of them were actually projects,
Mhm.
when you look at that, when you look at your to-do list, sometimes you get overwhelmed because it's task, task, project. Oh, project. Oh, I've got this and this and this and that, and I have to think through the whole thing in order to figure out what to do.
Mhm.
But if you just have a next actions list, it's just tick, 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 and your brain doesn't revolt when you come to the next thing. And when you cross out something that's the next action on your project list, then you go back to the project list, and you should keep a project list by itself and say, what's the very next physical action to move that project forward? And then put that one on your to-do list or your next actions list. So you're always, the only things that you have on your next actions list are actually actions that you can take. You'll
I like
find
that.
you'll find that's a very calming
Mhm.
impact to you because you don't get your brain doesn't do that when you see a project, right? And you can actually make progress.
I like that a lot.
So
Yeah.
so that's one way to help with overwhelm. Similar kind of thing with email, right? I actually have a program for getting your email inbox down to 0 in 5 days.
That
You
sounds
can do that.
amazing.
You can do that, but it takes a little bit of discipline. Mostly what you do is you take stuff that's old and just
Dump it.
archive it.
Yeah.
Don't dump it because it's just electrons. You can keep
Uh-huh.
it, or just archive it so it's not in
Okay.
your inbox. And
Okay.
then you process every one of those emails. First, is it important? If it's not important, trash it. Next, is it actionable? If it's actionable, then if it's actionable, then you can either do it or defer it. And the way we make that defer or do it, if it takes less than 2 minutes, do it
Okay. Do
now.
it. Right.
Just do it. If it's not actionable, then you just have to file it, right? Because that's the other option, right? It's either actionable or it's not. If it's not actionable, if it's important but not actionable, that means you need to file it somewhere. Maybe it's contact information, maybe it's,
An
some
article
report,
that's,
article,
yeah.
whatever. If it's an article you want to read, well, that's a defer it, right? Because it's going to take you more than 2 minutes. But if it's less than 2 minutes, just do it. Because it doesn't even make sense to delegate it
No.
if it's less than 2 minutes, because it's going to take you more than 2 minutes to explain to whoever it is that you want to do it for
Yeah.
you to figure out how to delegate.
I
So,
like that.
so that's how you can take care of getting your inbox down to
Right.
0.
Something that I like to add to that too is as we're recording this, we're coming up on the end of a year. I like to sit down at the middle of the year and the end of the year and take a hard look at what do I need to unsubscribe from? Because it
That's
starts creeping up on you, and pretty soon that email just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. But if you have a planned time, and so for me, it's at the end of June and the end of December, I sit down and I look at it and go, am I really getting value from this? If not, unsubscribe. And I'll spend an hour and just unsubscribe or a half hour, whatever it takes. And boy, that takes the pressure off
it really
for
does.
a while. And then somehow they start landing in your inbox.
Yeah, yeah.
But if you
Oh,
do that a couple times a year, that keeps it from growing to such an unmanageable number that you can't handle it. That you
yeah,
just, I can't even look at my email. There's too much.
that's right. That's right.
So that's
So
just a
that
little
that's
tidbit that
that's
I've tried.
yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah. Well, what about those that find themselves, well, let me back up a minute. I know there's a project that we need to do a next action on, but that pile of stuff sitting over there is crooked. I think I'll go straighten it. And then I probably should take out my trash because I got up. And then maybe I should go put some other stuff someplace else in the office. And pretty soon, an hour
Squirrel.
more, has gone by.
Yeah.
What do you have for those kinds of people?
Right. So
Mhm.
um there's two pieces of this, right? One is the distraction and the other is the procrastination.
Mhm.
Um, Sometimes we use distractions as a procrastination
We
technique,
do, yes.
right? Particularly if there's some reason that we don't want to do what it is that we know we should do,
Yeah, we
right?
got to eat those vegetables sometimes, but there may not be our favorite thing.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. Well, it turns out that there are, I think, 6 different reasons that we procrastinate. One is that it's boring. It's
Hmm.
something that you just, it doesn't give you any, right? It's just it's boring. Sometimes it's difficult. It's a challenge, right? Sometimes it's unstructured, right? We don't know what, right? Or um it's difficult, it's unstructured, it's boring. It lacks personal uh, 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 personal fulfillment or personal achievement, right? It
Okay.
doesn't provide that. There's no intrinsic value or to you anyway, or there's no extrinsic value, right? So but figure out why it is that you're procrastinating. If you find yourself procrastinating a, a, around a particular project that you're working on, figure out what it is that's causing you to procrastinate, and then come up with something that will overcome that procrastination. Right? So,
Okay.
for example, if it's a boring task, go someplace fun to do it.
Oh, okay.
To take that, it's not, so I'm gonna go to my favorite coffee shop and I'm gonna have my favorite coffee drink or tea or whatever it is that your beverage of choice, right? Okay, go to the bar and have a beer. I don't care. I'm not, no judgments here. But reward yourself in some way by putting yourself in a not boring place.
Mhm.
All right. And your reason for going there is to do that thing. Your reason for going there is not to have a good time. Your reason for going there, right? Another one, if it's unstructured or you don't know what the next step is, well, write down the next step. What is the very next thing you can do? And do that.
Because you
Don't
may not
don't
have,
try to do the whole thing. Just do that.
well, and you may not even know what the whole thing is,
That's correct. If it's
which is part
very
of what
if
keeps you from starting.
right.
Yeah.
But if you make one step, okay, that's done. Now what's the next step? And
Okay.
sometimes, as you said, Diane, it may reveal what's the next step. By doing the first step, you may figure out, oh, well, I thought was the next step isn't the next step. It's something different, right? So take it one step at a time, right? If it's unstructured or a challenge, right? You maybe the first step is to do some research on what's the right way to approach it. I know we're teaching a lot of people how to use AI right now. So if you're not sure how to approach a problem, ask AI, ask ChatGPT or Copilot or whatever, how should I approach this problem?
They give you lots of ideas.
It's a great thought partner.
Yeah.
Uh, another thing that you can do, right? If it lacks intrinsic value to you, well, the first question is, why are you doing it? Well, it's probably because it has value to somebody else. Okay, well, make sure that you're clear on why you're doing it and do it for that reason.
Right.
That will help bump up its priority, right?
Something I'd like to add is take a look at your team, because sometimes there's somebody else on your team who enjoys doing some of these things that we don't like, and so we procrastinate on. So I'm really bad about data entry. That bores me to death, but I have to do a certain amount of it in my job. And I've got a couple team members who'll just sit there and just key their little hearts out, and they get that warm fuzziness from just sitting there and entering data, where to me it's like, oh, please don't make me do this. And so if it's appropriate, I will pass it off to them and let them do that while I go do something else that fulfills me a little more or moves the needle in my business or something along those lines, instead of sitting there being the data input person. So if you know that about your team, sometimes we can
Yeah,
help that. And then now we're not procrastinating on it because we've been able to share it with somebody who lights up because they get to do it. And we don't always think about that. We think because I don't like doing it, you're not going to like doing it either. But it might not be true.
yeah, absolutely, right. And that's and I talk to people about delegation all the time, right? There are things that you should delegate because you don't enjoy doing them or you're not good at them, whatever it is. Even if you're good at them, but if you don't enjoy it, delegate it. Look for
If you
somebody you
can,
can
you bet.
delegate it to. Because again, as you correctly point out, there may be somebody on your team who really likes doing that stuff, right? So, um, yeah, that's a really good point. If you're procrastinating on something continuously, if you have resources available who could help you with that, that's another way to get around the self distraction or the self procrastination thing.
And
Now
then
let's
reward yourself. Even if you have to do it
absolutely.
in a boring area, when I will work on this for X amount of time, And when I'm done, I get to go do whatever, or I can go up front and talk to somebody, or I can do whatever, whatever it is that feels like a reward to you, because
Yeah.
that has helped too.
Oh,
I
absolutely.
think,
Right.
um,
Particularly, right. If it's something that doesn't, that has no intrinsic reward,
mhm,
create an extrinsic one,
yes.
right?
And
Give
then,
yourself, if it's a tiny thing, give yourself a piece of chocolate. If it's a big thing, take yourself out to dinner, right?
right.
That's something in between, right?
And
Um,
be aware of that with your team as well, because they have things that they don't enjoy doing. And sometimes we just tend to just give them more and more and more and more, and we don't stop and think about they need some little rewards too, just like we do.
that's right. That's
And
right.
walk a mile in their footsteps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or I'll put in another plug, right?
Uh-huh. Mhm.
Maybe there's a way to automate it with AI
Could be. Yeah.
for stuff that nobody likes to do, but it's got to be done,
Gotta be
right?
done. Right.
Um,
Right.
so you also asked about distractions,
Yes.
right? And there are, I suffer from this a lot because squirrel, because I have ADHD, right?
I like to call them time robbers.
Yeah.
They sneak
Um,
in and they rob your time.
so the thing that I have found that's really helpful for me is, of course, turn off all of the distractions.
Yeah.
Turn off everything that beeps or buzzes or dings, right? Just turn it off, right? And set a timer.
Yes.
There was
That
a
timer is important.
an Italian fellow um, named Francesco Cirillo. Can you tell us an Italian name? He came up with a thing he calls the Pomodoro technique.
Hmm.
I don't know if your listeners have heard of this. Pomodoro is the Italian word for tomato. And if you've ever been in a kitchen in Italy, you will see that the timers are all shaped like little tomatoes. They're the little, right? They're called Pomodoros. And so a Pomodoro is a kitchen timer, and you set it for 25 minutes. And you focus just on that thing for 25 minutes. Then you take a 5-minute break. But you figure out what it is you're going to focus on for 25 minutes. So you get half-hour chunks essentially.
Mhm.
And then you repeat that 3 or 4 times and then take a longer break. But you'd be amazed if you focus on something for 25 minutes, you'd be amazed how much you can get done.
Definitely. It's a very powerful concept and one we use a lot in my office because some of the work that we do is very tedious. And if you'll commit to that a chunk of time like that, it's amazing what you can get done. And then get up, move around, go do something, and come back. And if you need
Yeah.
to hit it again until you get it finished. But it's amazing that really intentional time. And
Yes.
sometimes I have to just close my office door so that I don't hear what's going on up front of my office and I'm not paying attention to who's coming in the door, the phone ringing. But give yourself that really, really good focused work time and
Yeah.
makes a
And
huge difference.
again, you'd be amazed how much you'll get done.
Yes.
Something that you might think was going to take you a couple hours, you get done in 25 minutes.
Yes.
You're able to focus without distraction. It's really hard. So many entrepreneurs suffer from ADHD. It's called the entrepreneur's disease. Uh, we are very distractible. We like chasing shiny objects. It's part of the mindset of an entrepreneur,
Mhm.
of a small business owner, that we, we're enamored by the latest and greatest. But if you really focus, and one of the gifts of being ADHD, by the way, is the ability to intensely focus. And so if you can tap into that and just focus for 25 minutes, you can get an amazing amount of stuff done.
Well, I'm glad you shared those with us. Those are some great tools to use to help us keep us out of that land of overwhelm because distractions and procrastination help you jump the fence into the land of overwhelm really easily.
That's right. Because
Yeah,
what happens is you get overwhelmed, and so you procrastinate, and then you got more stuff because you didn't get anything done, and it's a vicious cycle.
it is.
And that's why, again, I urge my clients to recognize that it is about progress, not perfection.
Right.
A great book that I read recently, I mean, this I think probably thematically for my year, was called The Gap and the Gain
Oh, yeah, it was a
by
good book.
Dan Sullivan and Dr. Ben Hardy,
Yep.
right? I don't know if you've talked about it here on this show
I
or
haven't.
not,
So if you want to
but
go a brief little
yeah,
synopsis, go for it.
yeah. So the the problem that entrepreneurs have very often is that we measure ourselves against some goal. And even if we get to 80% of the way there, we focus on the 20% of the gap that's remaining instead of celebrating the gain that we made to get to 80%. And the mindset of beating yourself up is not helpful in getting more stuff done. That negative mindset and appreciating the fact that you have made tremendous progress. Think about where you were a year ago or 5 years ago in your business, right? Think of the progress that you've made to date. Now, yes, it's not exactly where you wanted to be, perhaps, or even, and he says this, and I think this is amazing, right? Even when we set a goal and we get there, what do? We beat ourselves up because, oh, I missed that opportunity. I missed this other opportunity. We still live in the
Mhm.
gap, and that negative mindset is not healthy. It's not helpful.
And it keeps
So,
us stressed out and it keeps us unhappy at home. And it has such a ripple effect coming off of it.
right. So the daily practice that will really help with this, I do this every evening before I go to bed. Write down 3 wins from today. Don't have to be big. 3 wins from today, things that you're celebrating that you accomplished. And then write down 3 wins for tomorrow. What are you going to accomplish tomorrow? What are you looking forward to tomorrow? It puts you in an attitude of gratitude. Be thankful for what you have done, for what you have accomplished. And one of the interesting things that I found is that very often those things that I wrote down as sort of, I hope this will happen tomorrow, or I'm hopeful of this outcome or this win, you know, very often those things come to pass.
Right? Because you've spoken them and you've put them into action. Yeah.
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 So,
Very good. Well, now that we've kind of dissected overwhelm, procrastination, and distractions, if we are aware of those things, it would help us understand how valuable our time is. And if we know the value of our time, that gives us another tool to help us stay away from some of the distractions and the procrastination and things because we start putting a dollar sign on it. If I've spent too much time in email, I start looking at it going, ooh, that just cost me X amount of dollars when you know the value of your time. Let's unpack that area a little bit.
yeah, one of my networking partners says that your time is worth whatever it is that you spend that has the lowest value. In other words, if you spend your time doing $10 an hour tasks, then your time is worth $10 an hour.
Out.
So think about that. And of course, there's a recipe for delegation.
Mm-hmm.
That would be really, really helpful if you write down, and this is a great tool for figuring out what your time is worth. Write down for a week, spend a week or 2 weeks writing down what you spend your time on.
That's very eye-opening for people who don't track their time. Very eye-opening.
Yeah. And value it. Is there somebody that I could have found? Yeah, okay, right. Let's not worry about whether or not they done it perfectly. But
Mhm.
is there somebody that could have taken that off my plate? That's, a $10 an hour or a $20 an hour employee, right? Some virtual assistant or again, maybe AI, right? Is there some way I could get that off my plate? What are the low value? What are the medium value? Maybe you do red for low value and yellow for medium value and green for high value, right? Going and talking to a client, that's incredibly high value,
Mhm.
right? Spending your time opening the mail or reading your email or chasing down a rabbit hole on social media. Um,
We would
those are
never do that.
lower, no, those
No.
are lower value. Those are lower value activities. So take a look at how you spend your time. And if you're spending the vast majority of your time doing $10 an hour tasks, maybe what you ought to do is make a list. What are the kinds of things that you're doing that are only worth $10 an hour? Can you find enough of those things? I bet you can, that you could justify hiring an assistant if you don't have one. Uh, but but really looking at, and honestly, this was one of the biggest challenges that I had when I first started doing coaching because I was a productivity coach. And the biggest learning that I had was that small business owners have absolutely no clue what their time is worth,
None. None whatsoever.
right? And look, I get it. It's because you're changing hats 17 times a day. And this 5 minutes you're taking out the trash, and the next 5 minutes you're talking to a client or a prospect, right? And when you're doing a wide variety of things, how do you put that into a single dollar value? Well, you
You
can't.
can't. No.
But you can track that stuff. I would urge you to sit down at the end of each day and maybe in Excel or in on a chart on a piece of paper, write down how you spent, you know, maybe 15-minute blocks, something like that, looking back at your calendar, thinking through your day. Don't try to do it on Friday and do the whole week because you won't remember, right? Do it every day, write it down, then do spend 5 minutes color coding and saying, wow, look how much of my time I spent doing, $10 an hour tasks. It'll be eye-opening, I can
Versus
promise you.
versus how much time I spent doing $300 or $400 an hour tasks or
Exactly.
projects, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Yep.
So that's the way that I would urge the listeners to think about the value of their time. I mean, yeah, most coaches and consultants say, well, I charge, 300 or 500 or $700 an hour. But what fraction of their time are they actually doing that kind of work?
It's a small amount
It's
because you have
tiny.
a whole business to run in addition to the actual thing that you're offering out there.
That's right.
Yeah. And you've got research to do and you're building this and you're creating that. And that's the very small amount of it is actually of your total time is actually billed on
Spent
out to somebody.
on that really high value
Yeah.
task. So your goal is to maximize the number of hours that you're working on those high value tasks.
And when you do that, I know from experience, your gross revenue will start to grow because you'll become more cognizant of, okay, I'm going to go spend a little bit of time on social media, but I'm setting a timer. And you're no longer just getting lost out there. You'll give yourself 15, 20 minutes or something. And now I got to get back and work on this other project.
That's right.
And you become so aware of what it's costing you to go do these other tasks. And that's a great place to be as a small business owner in the home services industry, knowing that value, knowing the dollar amount behind it.
That's right. Absolutely. And just track it for a week or two and you'll be amazed.
Hmm.
You could even ask a key staff member to do this. Hold yourself accountable and say, maybe your director of operations or your bookkeeper or whoever it is, one of your right hand person, as it were. Ask them to keep track of it and say you're going to share it with each other at the end of the week, right? That's a way to keep yourself accountable for it because otherwise it might not happen.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You
Let's
do
be
need
honest.
that.
We
Yeah.
get busy, we forget, right? But if you had somebody you were going to be accountable to at the end of the week as to how you spent your time, I'd be willing to bet that you'd be a much more likely to actually do it.
I know here in my office, my whole team, we send an email out each morning of here's what we intend to work on today. And then the next morning, here's what we actually did the day before, and here's what we intend to work on the next day. And boy, has that made our productivity go up because we have accountability between the three of us.
That's great.
It's that, wait a minute, how come that's still sitting out there? It's been there for over a week. How come that? Do you need some help? Is there something I can do to help you get this project moving? And
Right.
it's a little tedious because you don't want to sit there and do an email, but boy, is that helpful to help you get moving on that next thing and not get lost in the phone's ringing and people are coming in and there's emails and FedEx just stopped in and here comes UPS and on the day goes
Right.
because you have to get back to that list of things. Keeps
Right.
you focused a little better.
Yeah, I don't know if you do uh, this practice, but one of the things that I've found been really helpful for me is I name what are the three most important tasks for
Hmm?
the day, right? I know it's not more than three, particularly if my day is full of meetings, which happens on occasion, right? But then there's also the one must do. Of those three most important tasks, there's one thing that I cannot end the day without having done it.
I like
Um,
that one too. I've not done that
that's
because
something
mine
maybe you
usually
could
has
play
more
with
than
that with
three,
your,
but
yeah, well, I would argue that if you have more than three priorities, you don't have any priorities.
because mine's usually client driven. Yeah, you
Understand?
got to get these things out. But I like that idea that there is one that even if you didn't get the other two done, you can't go home till you get this one done.
That's right.
It gives you
So,
some motivation to get it done. I'm hungry. I want dinner. I got to go home.
well,
So let's get
or
this
it gives
done.
you motivation to do it first.
Yes. Yep.
As
Get
soon
it.
as you have a break, as soon as you're not doing something else, work on that.
Yeah. Especially on meeting days because, you and I spend a lot of our time on Zoom and you get Zoomified towards the end of that day. It's like, I can't deal with anything else. And a project like that uses a different part of your brain
Absolutely.
and go do something different. And now I feel like I can go home. I actually accomplished something. Not that you didn't in your meetings, but that you accomplished something. So that sense of accomplishment
Yeah.
gives a nice little dopamine hit that we all need.
Yeah. That's really great.
Yeah. Well, we're coming up on the section of the show where I ask my famous question, and you can answer related based on these conversations and topics we've been talking about. But what is some sort of a hidden or unique profit leak that you've seen as you're working with other small businesses? And I'm going to drop some money in our profit bucket as we unpacked another
Yeah.
profit leak.
So I think I would go back to, I mean, there's two big profit leaks that we've talked about today, right? One is spending your time doing stuff that you should not be doing
That's
as
a
the
huge
small
one.
business
Yeah.
owner, right? Spending your time doing things you should not be doing. Sometimes you do that because, well, there's nobody else to do it.
Right. Yep.
But sometimes you do that because, well, it helps me avoid this other thing that I really don't want to do,
Mhm.
right? And that's where the huge profit leak comes in. Putting off those important but not urgent things in for whatever reason. Mostly it's because, well, I'm not sure what to do next, or I'm overwhelmed by the size of the project. So just take it one step at a time.
And don't let perfection get in the way.
That's right.
Yeah.
Done is better than perfect.
Right. Yes. Wow, you've really delivered a lot of value again. I'm so thankful that you came back and we were able to unpack these topics because they're so important as you and I both work with these small businesses and trying to help them become more successful, more profitable, less stressed out, have the better cash flow in their businesses. And if we can share a tool, a tip, something that they can take with them and say, I'm going to try that. I loved your idea about listing the tasks and the projects on the paper. Might have to try that one myself. You've given so many ideas today. So thank you again for being such a giver, being willing to share.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Diane.
You bet. And I know you've done it on the prior episodes, but once again, why don't you let people know how they can reach out and get a hold of you?
So I am always on LinkedIn. Well, not always, but I do go there at least once a day. So go to LinkedIn. We'll put that in the show notes. And the other thing is an email to Stephen@profitminds.net, Steven @profitminds.net is my email address.
And I'd encourage you to go check out their site. They've got a lot of great information out on their website. I know earlier I had been poking around out there again because I need that little refresher of what type of stuff that he has to share with everybody. So just encourage you to go check out his site, send Stephen an email. He's a great guy and he'll be really happy to hear from you. So we're going to call that a wrap today, and we're going to just start looking for another guest that we can bring you for our next episode as we search the local area, trying to find some great people to bring you some immeasurable value to help you grow and succeed and become more profitable in your business. So thank you again for joining us. As always, check the show notes. We always have a giveaway for you down there. And they do change from periodically, so check it. Even if you've gotten one before, go back and check it again. There's usually something new out there. Or you can go to profitcoachforyou.com, and we always have our free resources there as well. So I encourage you to download all the free stuff you can get because, hey, that's how you get to know us a little bit better and can utilize some of these tools in your business. Thank you again for joining us for this episode, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Thank you, Diane.